Hi, everyone. Great to be here. I have the pleasure to be here together with Ashley Dudarenok, and I'm so glad that finally we could talk about your new book. So, what's it called, Ashley? Tell me.
Thank you, Pascal. It's called Innovation Factory.
Yeah. How do you come up with that title? That's something that I really would be interested in because innovation is in there, and I'm keen on anything related to innovation in China.
Well, innovation is your topic, and ultimately, it is a playbook for global brands and companies on what they could learn from China. And China is today known as the steel factory of the world, right? But in the past decade, we see more and more innovation coming out of the country. So it is a factory of innovation right now, and hopefully, it will inspire companies outside of China to look at this market and this country and its business processes in a slightly different way.
Yeah, no, so because for myself, I've been challenged for many, many years to tell people, look at China, look at the East. Not all innovation comes from the West. And so I loved the fact that you wrote this book. I also saw the subtitle. It's about digital, which is, of course, your topic. I mean, you're the expert, the digital marketing expert. So this is a lot about digital, right? This book? And maybe you can
absolutely. There are three major themes that the outline covers. And the first theme is on customer-centric ecosystems, because China is, without a doubt, the country with the most tightly knit ecosystems today that are focused mostly on customer centricity. In other ways, how do we capture consumer, personalize for the consumer, and make sure the consumer stays within that ecosystem and related platforms. And there's a lot of things that tech companies from around the world can learn from China's experience, both successful and not successful, and also learn from China's stage, because companies outside of this market are probably at a different stage of development, and they can already foresee some of the challenges that China is tackling. So this is what the first theme is about. The second theme, in terms of learn from China, is in fact about the future of retail. So we see that retail is becoming more direct to consumer, and brands take on a lot more responsibility over community engagement, live streaming, and coming up with new business models, rather than just kind of sitting there producing the content either for their, let's say, marketing or a product itself, and then hoping that somebody else will help them sell it, right? And this is a big change, and there's a lot of new consumption brands in China that can inspire brands, let's say, from Australia or the US or Germany or whatever, that are also planning to launch direct-to-consumer brands and operate their traditional brands in this direct-to-consumer manner in their home markets or later on even in China. And the third theme, what kind of the world can get inspired and learn from China, is also management models. And this is probably the most surprising one, because a lot of kind of countries around the world were looking at, let's say, Japanese models of efficiency or German models, for efficiency and optimization, and management and leadership models from the US. But few companies and countries were learning from, let's say, Chinese models. First of all, because they're not very known, and also because only in the past, again, decade, we actually see that they can produce outstanding results. So we're also looking at these in the book.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. I printed it out. You see, I don't have a real copy yet, so maybe you can send me one. But
it's coming. It's on its way.
It's a fantastic book, and I enjoyed all three of the themes very much. I mean, the ecosystem part is something that I've lived very much myself, so I know what this is about. But I was also quite surprised with that last chapter on what we can learn from China, what China can learn from the West. Specifically, because I do believe that if you look, I mean, I speak constantly for foreign audiences, most of it European companies, and they have no clue, no idea what the companies are about. If I talk about a company like Ping An, I mean, most people have never heard about it, the biggest insurance company in the world. And so I think it's really a revelation that you started tackling this and showed the management models or the leadership models that are coming out of China. But let's start from the beginning of this book, because there's so many chapters and so many things. I would like to go one by one. But maybe before we do that, you didn't write the book on your own. You co-authored it with Ron. Maybe you can talk a little bit about who he is, or what his contribution was, and how you worked together on this book.
Absolutely. So Ron has run one of China's prominent TPs, which is Taobao Partners. So he was in the business of helping Western brands sell on Chinese social media platforms such as, Tmall, Jingdong, etc. And currently, Ron is also working on helping American brands, where majority of the global brands come from the US, to launch D2C models. So he has seen how the sales part of things, distribution part of things, retail part of things really transformed in China. And right now he's bringing that mindset to the American brands to teach them launch local products for the local market first, in the same manner, which I think is a fantastic learn from China use case, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And that's how we came together. I wanted to write the Learn from China book. And his experience was just, absolutely complimentary. And the collaboration with him, he's a very structured person, was fantastic. So when you have a co-author for the book, you have so far written a few books, and you've always written it just by yourself. But if you co-author it with someone, it's like marriage. You really need to make sure you guys are on the same page. And I'm very blessed that Ron was exactly that person.
Yeah, you could really feel in the book that there's different perspectives, and also different examples, which I really enjoyed. Some of the examples which he gave really resonated with me. And so we'll get into some of this, but let's start with the innovation drive. And this is the first chapter that you talk about. And you talk about a lot of interesting things. Talk about the lack of legacy. You talk about things like reforms, hardworking Chinese. I mean, we all know Chinese are really hardworking people. I mean, they were, at least in the past, and it's still like that very often. Education, government planning, tech transfers, a lot of things you mentioned on why China actually was driving this innovation, or is driving this innovation right now. Of course, timing is one of them. But the question I have for you is that, I mean, how do you see this being caused because of the West? And how do you see it's actually being caused because of China itself? So, because very often when I talk to people in Europe, in America, they will say, yeah, China grew crazily and they start to innovate, but it's because we gave them all the tech, we gave them all the money, we basically helped them to succeed. And if that would be the case, then it should stop now. But what do you think?
Well, I think that China has definitely learned a lot from, let's say, the West. So when we talk about like learn from China and China learning from the West, that has been going on for years and years. And today, a lot of companies around the world, or countries around the world, complain that China learned a bit too much. And that's, I think, the starting point of conversation. 30, 40 years ago, what helped China move from, a very basic place to being at the forefront of innovation is that we had overseas Chinese, and we also had the countries that offered their expertise. Since 1980s, China has learned from countries such as Japan and Germany when it comes to manufacturing, for example. To a lesser extent, they also learned from the US. But when it comes to cooperation, right, they learned not only manufacturing, but they learned how to cooperate. They sent people from the government to go abroad and to study how to manage. They learned how to bring people back, because there were a lot of overseas Chinese. And that's another force that very few people talk about. The overseas Chinese that provided their know-how, provided their capital, provided their insights. And that's how the rise started happening. Today, we have a different China. As a friend of mine, Francis Kramer, said recently, it was very interesting. He said, China is an old culture, but it is a new country. And this is true. So
interesting.
Is China innovating or learning the same way as in the 80s? Absolutely not. It is old culture, but it's a new country. So today, the innovation that comes out of China is not blank sheet innovation. It's not that there was nothing and suddenly there is, 0 to 1.
Well, there seldom is anywhere in the world. I mean, there are still a few, but more, less and less, specifically with artificial intelligence.
This cult, this focus on blank sheet innovation is happening primarily in the West. Because in China, when it comes to innovation, what China innovates today is the business models. It's looking at all these different elements and saying, okay, how can I put it together and start making money with it? How can I innovate a business model? And that's what the rest of the world can learn from China. And of course, operating in such a unique market, big market, fast-paced market, etc., there are a lot of
opportunities,
room and opportunities to test them out, to see what works and adapt that, and what doesn't work, you just discard and move forward. So this is beautiful. And I think when it comes to this innovation, today we are at a stage where for many years, Western companies feared to bring their best technology to China. They feared, because they would say, you know what, if I am, I do not know, BMW or what. Exactly. Everybody was like, you know what, I still remember those discussions many years ago when Crocs was trending globally. Right now they're big in China, but back in the day, they were trending globally. And they would, in China, they would really hesitate. They were saying, you know what, we're going to bring it to China and then somebody's going to copy and sell, knockoffs for $10. But there will be people, this is not your addressable kind of market. These are not the people that you want to target. You want the Gen Zs. You want the trendy little, trend followers. That's who you want. So today, if you don't bring your best technology to China, you're going to die. And that is why many companies, including, global, let's say, automobile industry, cosmetic industry, in-body, on-body industries, they relocate their global research and development centers to China, because the future of mobility is not built in Germany, and the future of, let's say, skincare is also not built in the US, but it is being built in, places like Shanghai and let's say Hangzhou and whatever else. So to answer your question, it was a very long answer. To answer your question, I do believe that innovation in China is evolving. I do believe Chinese have learned a lot from the collective West, and they continue learning. But I do also believe that China has a unique angle to offer in this innovation space, even after the active phase of learning from the West is kind of closing down.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think it comes to the second point as well, which is about the digital development. I think very often what we thought is when Chinese will copy the product, they'll just do the exact same and promote it the same way and put it in the market in the same way. But as you say in the book very nicely, I mean, they're much closer to the market, much closer to the customer, which ultimately means that they understand very often what the customer needs faster than we do somehow in the West. And trends are created. And if trends are created, then of course you need to be close to that market. So I think not letting your products come into the Chinese market, you might miss out on the trends. And I think that's really something that you caught into that book. And a colleague of mine at Nextworks, Peter Hinson, he says there's 4 types of innovations. There's product innovation, which everybody talks about. There's business model innovation, there's market innovation, and there's service innovation. And I think specifically, and this is what you write very well in the book, which I really enjoyed, is how this market and service innovation in China really works. It's about taking things that exist, but then transforming it in a new market or with a new service so that customers get a completely different experience from the exact same product. And so I totally agree, and I enjoyed that very much. Now, what do you think drives this type of innovation besides the market? You talk a lot about the ecosystems in itself. How do you see these ecosystems being actually transformative? What is so specifically, because everybody talks about ecosystems these days and it's a buzzword everywhere, and it's like, it's about alliances working together, right? But there's much more to it, and you explain this very well into your book and into the 3rd chapter. So maybe you can explain a little bit more on what you mean by ecosystems, or what is so special about China and ecosystems?
So today, globally, there is a formula You start with a product or service,
Mm-hmm.
then you transition into a platform, and then you
Yes.
transition into an ecosystem. So in
Mm-hmm.
business, there's only two states. One state is your business is growing, and the second state is your business is dying. Just like in nature, you cannot freeze in the middle and be a flower just like that, right? Your
Okay.
business is either growing or it is dying.
Mm.
So if your business is growing, that you are progressing from product/service to platform to ecosystem. If your business is not growing, then you are regressing from ecosystem to platform to product, then to that. So that is why this formula today is very kind of top of mind of a lot of Chinese companies, big and small. And they are faster than many of their counterparts around the world try to push to become first a platform and then an ecosystem. So a platform, in other words, is when you have a multi-versatile kind of platform business model that connects with each other, right? So for example, I've got a consulting business, and apart from that, we have a training business, and apart from that, we publish books, and apart from that, we do
podcasts,
tours and podcasts, etc. There are so many different ways to add value to that
to the
client, to that exactly same client and customer. And as a platform, it basically is either a product service platform, or you are a platform that provides money or data. So from your product, you innovate yourself into a platform, either providing products and services in a multitude of ways, or you provide data and money access. And then the next step is you become an ecosystem, which helps you to integrate even more services. But the core of your business is still this platform, right, that you're building. So in China, we have two types of ecosystems primarily. It's either industry based ecosystem, right? When we say, okay, you've mentioned Ping An, the world's largest insurance company, but it's not just insurance company. They are an ecosystem for money. Whenever you touch cash, whenever you touch like as of digital cash, this is what Ping An is all about. They're about life insurance and health, and they're about money and banking and investment and whatever else. They actually capture children quite early on, and then they encourage them to learn about financial literacy, investments, etc. They help them learn about health. They track them throughout their young life and adult life, etc., etc. So they become a very comprehensive service. Today, Ping An also has elderly homes that they built together with Chinese cities, where you can, as a client of Ping An Group, not only as their let's say insurance client, but as their banking client, you can get discounted rates to go and live in those elderly homes, and they look absolutely gorgeous, and obviously they have all the facilities and support that you might need, and they're very, very digitally powered. So this is an example of an industry-based ecosystem. And the other type of ecosystem is primarily basically platform ecosystem, when you focus on being retail, right, driven. So somebody like Alibaba, somebody like Tencent plus Jingdong. So you build the whole ecosystem around capturing the purchasing behavior of your consumer. You want them to buy everything from a car to a toothpick on your platforms.
Because it's touch points, isn't it? It's lots of touch points that you have. And so you constantly have a way to get in contact directly or indirectly, online, offline, with these same customers through different points. And that gives you not just data, if I understand from your book, but it also gives you the information that you need to say, this is what the service is that we should provide. This is the product that we should provide. And so it provides like a full circle of touch points, and it's like the user journey that you're following. So Ping An is a really great example. I use this a lot as well, simply because they're in agriculture, they're in healthcare, they're everywhere. And why would an insurance build an app for healthcare, for example, just to contact a doctor? I mean, there's a lot of things they do out of their focus. And I think what I liked about your book very much is that you see that they're cross-industry. that many of these companies, in this chapter specifically, you talk about Alibaba, Tencent, and they're cross-industry. They're not just doing one thing. We're not just doing e-commerce. We're not just doing, for example, healthcare. We're doing everything that the customer or the user needs. I really enjoy that very much. Maybe just one thing. I mean, there's a long list of examples you gave, which I really like, because although I know many of these names, Alibaba, Tencent, and JD, and so on, I mean, I talk about this a lot, and so do you constantly. People have an idea about who's Alibaba. They have an idea about who's Tencent. But then there's companies like Meituan or Kuaishou. I'm sure most of the people outside of China have never heard of them. And they're super apps, they're ecosystems. I mean, so who are these companies? Can you talk a little bit about these two, for example? I mean, just to educate a little bit people outside of China.
Absolutely. So Meituan, for example, they were a group buying company. Back when we had the war of group buying, basically, and Groupon, right? Groupon kind of war in China. There were so many different companies that offered that group buying. And Meituan essentially won the battle in some ways, and they saw an opportunity in daily services instead. So it's not just delivery, but they can, queue up for you. They can run an errand for you. They can, they can be kind of a on-demand personal assistant. On Meituan, you can get yourself a boyfriend rental services if you want to, impress your in-law, not in-laws, but to impress your parents, let's say, for major holidays and stuff. So this is an ecosystem that was able to capture people's daily tasks.
Necessities.
Right now, they deliver food, they deliver medicine, they go to government, organizations for you. You want to get married on a special date, they will queue up for you, etc., etc. And of course, they also have OMO services where they, provide you transportation and whatever else. The biggest, I think, the biggest excitement of Meituan Group was that they were invested by both Baba and Tencent, and they shifted their alliances very interestingly, and some say smartly, some not. And then they became a separate, very, very powerful ecosystem. So rather than being just a part of one of them, I
remember Meituan. I mean, long time ago, when it was like Dianping as well, there was like all these deliveries. I mean, every app that they had, you could find every restaurant in China and get ratings. And so it was just mind-boggling, the information. And people would actually look on the app before they went to the restaurant to see how long the line was and so on. But one of the things I've learned from this Meituan and Dianping before was really the hard work that they've put to contact every single restaurant. And I think this is very different from platforms in the West. In America, like Facebook started, but they didn't go and knock on doors to say, can you please log on to Facebook? They just existed because they were maybe the first one to come up with a new concept. But in China, it was really, really hard work. And that's also when you say these services, like even deliveries or things that you need. I mean, all these butler services, I mean, there's people involved. It's not just a platform where it's all online. And I think that's maybe a misunderstanding in the West, that we often think that these big platforms, it's only online. And I think that's where you talk a lot about online merge offline. And this is definitely a good example. So I really like Meituan.
That is also why it is so much more authentic, right? They used to go to restaurants to recruit those restaurants.
Yes.
If they get a complaint about the restaurant, they actually go and check out, is this a kitchen, because you need to upload your pictures of your kitchen, etc., and your setup. So you get complaints, they go, they chat with you. So there is a lot of manpower, there's a lot of focus on customers. And just like with any other product, be it a brand or a platform, in China, it is co-created with the consumer, co-created. You are working together as a team to say, you know what, this service could be better. Like, for example, also Meituan and a couple of other companies got in trouble when they, for instance, were penalizing some of their riders if the delivery happened, with a slightly bit of delay. So then who would bear responsibility? Not Meituan and not the customer, but the poor rider will be penalized. And when that came to light, consumers actually said, you know what, it doesn't make sense. You as a company, you're making a big buck. Don't torture the little guy.
Don't torture,
And that's the power of customer being engaged, because a customer is not just someone who purchases product or service, but they are your R&D department. They are your marketing department, because they help you co-create. They help you improve the product. They are your sales department, because they share, right, with their network, right, through word of mouth. So they help you sell. They are your business partners as well, etc., etc. This is how it works.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, Xiaomi is another one that you mentioned, and this is, I mean, everybody knows Xiaomi, the cell phone manufacturer. I mean, when it's about co-creation, they're a very good example as well, and their fan community. And so it's true that when we think about China, very often we don't think about creation, but because, I mean, we believe that they just copy and then they start doing things. But when it comes to co-creation, specifically with the collective mindset and the fact that the market and the customer is so dear to them, because if they don't address the needs of the customers, I mean, we know, and both of us, we know very well, the customer can make or break a brand very quickly in China. And so there's some brands, Western brands, that has really suffered from customers that are unhappy with certain services or certain statements that they made. We don't see that as much in the West, which means that it feels somehow in Europe that we have more time. But I think the customer is getting more empowered globally. But in China, you see it very often because of the scale, much more, and specifically online. So I think these examples are really good examples of why Chinese actually trust that these customers need to be well taken care of. Otherwise, they won't be taken care of. And can you say one more thing about Kuaishou? Because that's one of these brands that I think very few people know.
Absolutely. So Kuaishou started as a GIF creator. Okay, it was an app that helped people make GIFs, and then so it was basically a silly platform, right, where you go and it's kind of fun and all that. And then they turned into being a social media of the year, especially for lower tier brands. How did they do it? They allowed what we call down to earth content to go out of the way. At first, it was very, very local, like third, fourth tier cities, so smaller cities in China. Apart from GIFs, they started creating, short videos, and they were of their daily life. I don't know, so somebody will show you how he ties his shoes, or how somebody is doing chicken farming, or how you would wash your, I don't know, underpants. So something that you wouldn't even consider a content creation. So it was very different from other platforms where it was all, pretty studio light, and it really had to be beautiful in order to get the views. It was down to earth for Kuaishou.
Educational, very much.
Very yes, it was very hands-on, very educational, but also not pretty, down to earth. And then what happened is there was the rise of the KOL families, or we call them clans. So right now Kuaishou has like 7, somebody says 5, somebody says 8, basically let's say 7 clans of KOLs, and they are the big names on Kuaishou platform. They started very early on, a couple of years back, and they generated hundreds of millions of followers, and they started building their own bloggers. For example, I am the head of the clan, and just like in mafia, in Italian mafia, I right now appoint Pascal to be my left hand.
Really?
and then your daughter can be our third, and then my cousin can be whatever. So we will help them build their profiles, and we are kind of part of a collective. So on Kuaishou, there are those different collectives that are run by clans or families of bloggers that focus on a specific, specific topic, specific region, etc., which is very unusual compared to all other platforms. And slowly and gradually over the years, Kuaishou became not just a platform for lower tier cities where they learned how to boil potatoes, but people from Shanghai and Beijing discovered that this is fun. It's interesting to watch, and it expanded, cross city tiers, and it also became a lot more about sales. So these guys can sell products that are less sexy, like toothpaste. and they can sell local produce, like, again, oranges or potatoes or something like that. And this is the power of Kuaishou. They are down to earth. They are very big market. They are basic goods. And of course, majority are lower tier city consumers still, but they also reach some of the others. And yeah, today it's a social commerce platform. It's nothing to do with just GIFs or silly content. It's a platform that educates, entertains, and sells. And it operates, actually, even Kuaishou themselves, their internal team, they say that they don't own the company. The 7 families, the clans,
really?
clans own the company, because these guys really have
they decide,
a lot of power. So yeah.
But it's very interesting to see these interest-based communities that are being built, and there's 2 words that I really like in your description in your book. It's about authenticity, and really it's about people talking one-to-one and basically telling a story that people like. And you always find in 1.4 billion people, you always find people that kind of like the story that you tell. But then it's also about trust. And I wanted to talk a little bit about trust, because that's where, in the future of retail, your next chapter, you talk about this widespread trust. And this was probably the paragraph I liked the most in your book, because, I mean, I've written a book about trust, but that's not the point. What's the point here is that you say very clearly that the trust is at the basis somehow of these trust in online platforms as well in China. And if there's one thing that's in the West, people don't trust, it's online platforms. I mean, that's what everybody's talking about the whole time. The problems with the Googles and the Facebooks or the Metas and all the others that are trying to sell us stuff. And so we should be careful, specifically on our data. But here you tell a story about this trust is within the platform. So explain this, because I think this is critical to understand how everything is different in China when it comes to these e-commerce and other things on the online environment.
Right. So in China, I think why people trust platforms is because they have, majority of people, very positive experience with these platforms. Back when Alibaba went into their B2C business, that was right after SARS pandemic. And a lot of people started purchasing online, not as a choice, but because they had no choice. They had to get their, necessities, and online platforms offered that convenience. And Alibaba back then did not act as a Amazon platform saying, hey, here are 2 people that want to do business together, do it, and I'm going to get my commission. They acted as a bank when they said, okay, well, Pascal is selling and Ashley is buying whatever Pascal is selling. So I, as Alibaba platform, I will take Ashley's money, I will hold it, and only when Pascal provided the service and Ashley is happy, I'm going to release it. In other words, they took on unnatural responsibilities for the platform. They were a bank. And that made customer feel very much at ease, because whenever they did not like what Pascal was selling, I could just say, no, refund me the money, and the platform would always be on my side. Of course, that created hyper competition for brands, for products and services. Of course, it created very spoiled consumer, because I think that, I'm gonna get cheap, good, and right now. I believe that these 3 things at the same time are all possible. In China, up until today, we have about 60 to 70%, depending on the platform, purchases that are done online. Assisted. What it means is I go to the platform and I don't just click buy. I typically will go to the chat section and then I ask, oh, Pascal, I'm purchasing this pencil, but do you have it in pink perhaps? Can you personalize it and put my name on it? I mean, people, and that creates a lot of pressure on the brand and, manufacturer, etc. And that provides me a lot of kind of outlet and opportunity to communicate with you directly. Long story short, I, as a customer, for the past 15 years, let's say, just from the start of this Alibaba for consumer, Taobao, and later on Tmall, I had very positive experience with platforms. The same thing with variations happened with JD, but JD is different. They're not even a platform. They are a retailer. They purchase all the products that they sell, and then they resell them through their platform. So I have even better kind of service and trust. And companies like DEDA, right, when they have their challenges and issues, right now, when it comes to DEDA, if the driver is rude to me, I can really screw them over. I can screw their life so bad. And there are cameras installed in DEDA cars, so there can be no harassment on both sides. There's constant tracking, there's password, etc. So over time, and it was not always, rosy and beautiful. There were challenges. There were, horrors that happened everywhere in the world with these platforms and cheating and whatnot. But over time, consumer learned that it is rather safe to trust a platform, especially the one with big brand name. And if something goes wrong, I can report it and I will be looked after by the platform and also by the regulatory kind of organization. In the West, people feel left alone. They know that if I contact, I actually had a very painful experience with Facebook where somebody hacked their system, used my card to buy some sneakers online on our company account, and then for 3 months we were in touch with Facebook, and they kept saying that we purchased sneakers or we invested in this advertising or whatever else, and it only took a miracle for them to refund $10,000 US. It was quite a lot of money. So I feel hopeless. They don't reply me. I cannot contact them directly, and they basically tell me, no, you did it, when I didn't, and I don't have any other mean of pressure. Like I cannot go to government. To who do I go to actually pressure them into looking into my case? In China, people feel a lot more empowered in many ways. But at the same time, of course, right now we are reaching that stage where there's a lot of digital kind of interference in people's lives. And some of my friends also say, you know what, they go and they purchase groceries in supermarket and they look at their profile, when they pay with their face or with their palm or their WeChat wallet, and they say on the screen what's displayed is the full name, the address, and also that my friend has 3 apartments. And she says, why does the shop assistant need to see that I have 3 apartments under my name? So it's double. It's still evolving. It's not perfect yet. So some people are getting frustrated with the transparency and access levels and tiers right now. But in general, the trust is there, and it's a lot more of it.
Yeah. It's very interesting you say that some people get frustrated with the transparency of China. I mean, some people would say, what do you mean transparency in China? There's no transparency in China. But it's true. There's a lot of data being shared, and it's because they trusted it. And I think these platforms have been really learning how to deal with all these cases one by one by having all that pressure the whole time. While I think in the US specifically, I mean, we're a little bit just waiting out and much more pushing products to the market rather than trying to understand what is the best product that the customer needs. I'm very much aware of the differences now that I'm back in Europe. I've been in China for 20 years, and now that I'm back, I'm like frustrated about European or Western platforms, specifically American platforms, because that's what we use in Europe. I had the same experience as you have with Google. I mean, it was only $100, so it's not a lot, but that was $100 gone from my account. And it's now 3 months, and I have no idea why that was, what it was. There's no description, and I can't go to anyone to explain this to me. I've just forgotten about it. But imagine if this is 10,000 or 100,000. I mean, you have a real issue. And so this is something that I've learned as well. But going on to the next chapter 5, you talk about social commerce. And Jeffrey Towson, who is also wrote a quote in your book, he's a good friend of mine. He wrote that China is like 5 years ahead of the West when it comes to social commerce or social e-commerce. What do you think? Is it 5 years, and is the West going to catch up, or is it going to be a different model that is going to stay? What's your trend view on the future? Is the West going to copy everything from China when it comes to social commerce or not?
Yeah, I think China is definitely ahead. Where it's 5 years or 3 years, it depends on what you're comparing it to. When it comes to customer centricity, I think Chinese companies, out of necessity, not by choice, are forced to be hyper or even hysterically customer centric. Maybe hyper is not the right word. It's hysterically. They're hysterically
extreme customer centric.
Extreme.
Yes.
And that is 5 years. Absolutely 5 years. We were 5 years ahead. I just came back from the US and New York, and the customer centricity level in majority of the offline, online services that I have experienced firsthand is nowhere to be seen. But when it comes to, some, underlying technology or processes or whatever, ultimately, I think it's probably like 3 years. We are 3 years ahead and we are evolving. I believe that the world will arrive at social commerce as the major model. Why? For two reasons. Number one, because previous model, how we sell, is based on a linear progression of the customer. The customer has an interest, then they do research, then they contact, then they purchase, then they have questions or they want a refund. And it has it's very long journey, and it's kind of breaking it down into very unnatural cycles. Today, people go to a platform without intention to buy, something pops up, they're interested. At the same time, they're speaking with customer service. At the same time, they're proceeding with the refund. So the journey becomes much shorter. Awareness, activation, and action. That's how short the journey is. And I don't need to switch platforms. I don't need to go to a special customer-centric hotline in order to complain. I can do it all on, let's say, social media. With the same person that I'm purchasing, I can customize and I can complain and resolve my issues. So that is a global process. That's going to happen in the rest of the world as well. It might take a bit more time, but it will happen just because our habits have already evolved. And right now the service kind of needs to get there. And the second reason is that the more digital we become, the more we're going to get rid of a device. Our phone is going to disappear one day in the next 10 years, and we are going to operate with glasses, wristbands, or whatever else. And the whole journey of communicating with this interface without a device is going to be further crushed into something completely different. So these are global processes that will continue. But will the West copy exactly what's happening in China? No, it's not possible, because some of the lessons from China are non-transferable. And some of the lessons and experiences are transferable. For example, nobody can copy China's, 1.4 billion consumers. They cannot copy that consumers are very optimistic about the future in general, even though right now I would say the optimism levels are the lowest in the past 30 years. Different topic, but nonetheless they are optimistic. You're right. They are open to data. They are blah blah blah. So there are some things we can't copy. How good ecosystems are and how they work or not work together. But in general, yes, we are going to arrive at a version of social commerce globally, and I think it's inevitable.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. One of the things that I also liked, and to add on top of that, is the loyalty. And you talked about this in your book as well, but I think it was Alibaba as an example. I mean, I remember one time I was at Alibaba headquarters in Hangzhou, and a VP of Alibaba told me that we're looking wrong at the whole loyalty thing in the West. I mean, we're always trying to figure out the NPS score, the Net Promoter Score, and how loyal customers are to us, and are we doing a good job so their loyalty. And actually what we don't do is to figure out what our loyalty towards them is. And I think in China, because this extreme customer centricity, which you talk about, we constantly, or Chinese platforms constantly need to look at how they're doing towards the customer, not just how the customer is trusting them. And I think the trust goes both ways. And that it definitely in social commerce, I think it's all getting more and more integrated, and you don't know who the customer is anymore. You don't know what their influence is. You don't know when they're going to buy or how they're going to buy, and which is it online, offline, is it through glasses, or is it you don't know any of these things anymore. And so you need to build that kind of loyalty yourself. You need to be more engaged. So I think that's definitely, I mean, lots of good points, and I wish we had products or platforms like WeChat here in the West, combined with JD and Alibaba platform, although maybe they're coming here more and more. I mean, we see that now as well. But one of the things that you mentioned a lot about, maybe another topic, is the human touch. This is a chapter that you talk about, and you talk about, I think it was delivery, about QR codes. You talk about CRM, if I'm not mistaken. These things you don't see much here in Europe. I mean, the delivery is, I mean, it's getting better, but to be honest, compared to Chinese 24-hour delivery, I mean, there's no comparison for most of the products that I buy here. When you look at QR codes, you don't see it very often, and CRM is underused as well. So can you tell a little bit more about these things that made China so special, and if this is something that we can learn from as well outside of China?
Absolutely. So human touch, it's very interesting. The more digital China becomes, the more human the companies become. It's a little bit like globally, right? The more digitally connected we are, the more we are seeking some offline personal kind of connect, because we become more disconnected emotionally, so we're seeking that emotional closeness. So the same thing happens in a business sense. So today we have this concept of OMO, online merging offline, not just going into offline retail or purchasing purely online, because the brand cannot like, the customer cannot care less where and how. They just want to fulfill their need, and they want to touch and feel and buy where and how it's convenient for them. So we as a brand need to be prepared to serve them and service them best in all these scenarios. And currently, the level of our digital advancement and AI and the large language model and whatever else we want to use in order to attempt that are just not good enough. So we can do research, we can predict, we can give pointers on what the conversation with the customer was or how their behavior was. But in order to truly make it meaningful experience for the customer in China today, you need a human person to look at this information and actually make sense of it, and take that next step with the customer. That is why so much 60 to 70% of purchases in China online are assisted purchases. Assisted purchases. That is why so many brands in China do pop-up stores where they come and meet their customers offline and allow them to touch and feel the product, and allow them to ask questions and add their sales associate on their WeChat to be friends, etc., etc. In China, it is very important to be human as a brand, because we're so digital. So everybody is looking for that connection and looking for that asset, be it CRM or pop-up store or opportunity again to watch somebody live selling your product. There are companies all across the board, from car brands to houses. They sell houses, to somebody who sells underwear or pens that are live streaming 8 hours a day, and there's just a human there talking and walking you through. There is a virtual human that can do that, but there's also a human that can essentially take up that conversation.
So we are humans still, but the real interesting thing I think is really this human touch, as you say, being not replaced. I mean, or in the West, what I see very often in Europe is that we have used digital to replace a lot of humans to have more efficiency. Not always, because we still want to be very human as well. I mean, it's not that we say everything digital, but if you look at banks, for example, before 10 years ago, I go to the bank, I do my business with a person. Now it's impossible. You have to make an appointment.
To get through.
Through a phone that you need to basically press 4 or 5 numbers before you get to talk to someone, and then they tell you you can make an appointment if it's important enough with a person at a certain date, which of course I can't at that date. And so it's like really difficult these days to talk to people. And I was really missing China when I came back to Europe 5 years ago to really understand that, yeah, but if I have a problem, I want to talk to one person. And I think we're underestimating the power of humans within the transaction of e-commerce and social media. And this is something that I think China really figured out well, and we can learn a lot from that. I start really missing Chinese social commerce. But yeah, of course, on the other hand, I also like my Facebooks and LinkedIn and things like that I use on this site. But it's really interesting to see how that is evolved, and that we don't always think of China as being so human centric, so customer centric, so about loyalty, so about trust. These are words that usually, when we think about China, we're not going to talk a lot about. And this is the basis, or the basic elements of a lot of what you talk about in your book about this digital transformation. It's not just that the Chinese went faster into leapfrogging over the phones and so on, and went direct to mobile, and because of that, they don't care about people anymore. It's just the opposite. I mean, I really enjoyed that part of the book very much.
Absolutely. It's because they care so much about the people. They were able to align the offering, the digital platform, the ecosystem to serve the customer. Because if you are not able to do that, you're going to be dead tomorrow, and there's going to be 100 other companies trying to take up your space.
And I think that's another point. I think the competition in China is so fierce, which we have a lot less in Europe. I mean, we kind of define our own space, and we say, I'm the number one and number three in my own little pond. But in China, they go everywhere. And so there's a lot of competition. And I do believe that creates a different environment where you don't have the space or the opportunity to actually wait and see what happens. You have to react very quickly. So it's quite an interesting dynamic. So your book is really a revelation when it's about how, I would say, the digital and the human part are next to each other, and how they enforce each other and help each other, and specifically how data and ecosystems can actually make sure that the human isn't just monitored more, I mean, because that's what we think, but is actually enhanced and empowered. And that brings me, of course, to the last part of your book, which is about leadership, which I think is personally one of my favorite topics these days. Just because people don't know anything about Chinese leadership, and then or most people don't, many people don't, and then you see how they've created these huge conglomerates. I mean, constantly are reinventing themselves, constantly are creating new departments, new products, new services. I mean, the companies you mentioned before, like NIO, doing completely new battery as a service models. You see Alibaba going into different environments that you wouldn't have thought about. I mean, you see this with Amazon a little bit, and you mentioned that in the book as well, with going into cloud, going into e-commerce. I mean, they were a bookstore before. I mean, they're everywhere now these days. But in China, this is quite normal. And the management of these companies, I mean, you refer to an article from the Harvard Business Review called DEDA. And maybe you can explain it a little bit yourself, this, because I usually send this out to every customer I give a workshop on to beforehand, because if you see how that is actually playing out as a way of management, the way of thinking that we have in the West about management is kind of very different than how the Chinese are doing it. Can you explain a little bit?
Absolutely. So DEDA is digitally enhanced directed autonomy. That's what it's all about. And ultimately, it is a system where we say that a company will operate autonomously. So there's different divisions, different departments, different leaders that are going to be operated autonomously. And as long as we give them framework on where are we going, and they become in many ways kind of individual silos of speed and creativity, and we provide them resources and brand and support that's needed to realize the process or wherever they're going. Back in the day, probably about 15, 20 years ago globally, and especially it was in the US and I think Europe as well. Everybody was talking about this speed and flexibility. There was many models, right?
Yep.
And I was just recently speaking with a friend of mine, Gabor Holtz, and he was talking about 20 years ago when he came to China. He was teaching. He actually brought one of these models. He was supposed to teach Chinese companies how to be flexible and fast.
Flexible.
Yes. And then he realized when he was in the market, he realized that, wait a second, we don't need to teach these people, because in the West, we need to tell them how to break into those silos, how to create those work groups, how to focus on the result, how to support each other, and sometimes compete and sometimes whatnot. But in China, it worked this way because of, again, these unique circumstances in the market, the unique relationship with the customer, unique support and tech integration, etc., etc. So he said the product was completely useless because they operated this way. And when you look at DEDA, it is, in fact, a manifestation of exactly that. Every successful company in China is running one shape or the other, digitally enhanced, directed autonomy. And in some companies, they have their own kind of models. For example, we have in Haier, right, we have 人单合一, which is a model that's been there for like 20 years. And right now there are world's best kind of leadership journals also feature that model to say, hey, it's actually been there for 20 years and it transformed Haier from what it was to what it is right now. Successful, powerful, and we can learn something from it. In their model, they basically came to their employees, and they had tens of thousands of employees, and they said, if you're a leader, you will have to become a business owner. You will have to become an entrepreneur. You will have to have your team between 4 to 10 people, and you will have to be a part of our task force. What does it mean? It means that a customer sends a request. For example, my request is, when I buy your fridge, my strawberries mold in 1 day. So it means the fridge doesn't have good air circulation or whatever. So it's moldy. So it's bad. And this is a client request, client complaint, client pain point. So then this client complaint goes to Pascal right now and your team. So you are in charge of resolving that complaint, meaning you need to come up with a better product. You need to test whether it actually happens. You need to get the prototype out. You need to calculate together with your team whether this is a viable business model, whether this is a viable product. You need to launch it in the market and see, how to expand it with internal, external resources. So Haier started through 人单合一, they started, in other words, implementing this at scale. And those that did not want to become entrepreneurs and run such a task force had to leave the company. So right now they are a collection of those speed innovative units that support each other and push each other and compete with each other and create magic together, which is again, working for a lot of companies. And I think in the West, we can also learn from these successes and failures as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think the big challenge that companies in the West have when they're small, I mean, they're a startup. I mean, they operate very close to the customer, otherwise they don't survive. They are very flexible. They're very fast. They're willing to do everything. And so everything that's small, it's easy. And most people have no clue what they're doing when they start. And then as they grow, they think they know more and more what they're doing, and they want to add more and more layers. And I think that's the challenge, is how, if you have a big organization or bigger organization, how you actually keep that spirit of entrepreneurship that you had in the beginning, every company had in the beginning, it goes away. And at the end, you have 99% of the people who think they know what they're doing, but actually they're not progressing because they're managing other people or managing processes or managing systems, and they're not actually close to the customer. And now they need to learn what customer centricity is about. And so it's a whole turning around of the model. And I think the Chinese, because probably, as you say, the digital went so fast, the market was so competitive, that they had to figure out different ways, different models to survive, even when they became bigger and bigger and bigger. Because if you just say, we're going to be complacent and we're the number one. I mean, just like Alibaba, the biggest one, and then you have suddenly Pinduoduo that comes up, and they
and
try
Douyin.
to, and Douyin, and then they start to kill you in some areas, take your customers, and like, so you can never wait in China. And that is that entrepreneurial spirit. And I think you're right with hire. I mean, I've read a lot of these articles and a book about it as well, about the whole hire model. It's quite unique from a Western point of view. But in China, you see it very often in many companies. And I do believe that we should start looking more at these, I would say, Chinese models. So there's a lot to learn about data, but also about how to use data pretty much to not just get it for understanding how the customer and what the customer wants, but also to monitor, to get better understanding of what your organization does. And I think this is quite unique in China. So I think, I mean, the West can learn so much from China. Definitely. I mean, the whole thing about the future of retail you talk about this customer centristic ecosystems. I do believe that, I mean, specifically on ecosystem, it's the buzzwords in the West, but if you go to China, you're going to see it happening. But also this whole thing about online and offline, this social commerce. I mean, there's so many topics in your book that really people should learn. Every brand should actually at least read your book. And it's not a huge read. I mean, you can read it very quickly. I mean, within a day or a couple of hours, you can really read through it. But it has all the essential ingredients. And so I liked it a lot because it's really about the things that we need to learn in the West to enhance our customer centricity, to get better ecosystems, to get that human touch. It sounds weird, but it's really something we need to do. And to get the data to good use and really make sure that we are becoming more entrepreneurs as a company. So a lot of good stuff there. The last thing you talk about is also that China can learn from the West. And I think we should touch on that as well, because it's not game over for the West. It's not that China has everything better. I have that sometimes when I give a keynote that people say, oh, is this really all happening in China? So what should we do? Is it game over? And I said, no, we have really great stuff. We had great brands. I mean, we have great products that we've built, emotional connection of the brands. We have great strategies. I mean, there's a lot of things that we have. But China can learn a few things from us as well, because they're evolving as a society as well into a direction that we are often in Europe or in America already. So can you talk about this last one? What can the Chinese companies learn from us?
Well, there's still a lot of stuff to learn from the West. And I think when it comes to industry, there's definitely industrial practices. And there's still, as I said, 0 to 1 innovation. And there's still a certain level of transparency. And when it comes to the country level, China can, of course, learn how to build and use soft power. This is a complete disaster from the China side at this particular moment. But if we look at business and kind of broader strokes, if we generalize, which is never a good idea when it comes to China, such a big topic, but let's generalize. I think there are 2 major things. One is building legacy brands. So in other words, how do Chinese companies transition to becoming not just a brand name, but a love mark? Yes. Somebody like Nike has a love mark. Yep. But do we really have a Chinese company right now that has a strong love mark that transcends borders? Likely not yet. Likely not yet. We have strong players, we have strong brand names, but we don't have a love mark. And this will be a challenge for companies such as Huawei or BYD or NIO or Haidilao across the board. And at some point,
I've never seen a brand. I mean, there's maybe one brand that I can talk about of the whole China that I've seen European customers saying, I want to buy a Chinese brand.
DJI,
I want to buy this brand.
DJI.
Yes, you guessed it. You guessed it.
Yeah,
because professionals professionals, basically, I mean, they know that's the best. I mean, quality, price-wise, I mean, there's nothing better on the market. But it's true. I've never had anybody say to me, oh, I want to buy a Chinese car now. But they do say that about Japanese cars or even Korean cars. And so it should happen as well. The question is, are they able to do it? Because the love brands, it's really still a big issue in China.
I think in general, China has deep appreciation for brand and craftsmanship, and they like the promise that the brand gives, which is a good starting point. But we have not yet worked out the mechanics on how to get it done. And most importantly, a brand, legacy brand, let's say, and the love mark, it comes with time. So you cannot appear for 2 years and have a love mark. You need to be in the market for years and years and years so that it transcends just kind of money, product exchange, and becomes really a part of my identity. Ooh, like Mandarin Oriental. Recently, it's been voted the best luxury hotel group in the world. So Mandarin Oriental has been there for 60 years. And you remember this advertising, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of Mandarin Oriental. I am a fan. I mean, that advertising, that simple brainwashing advertising was the most successful hospitality ad ever, because once you stay in Mandarin Oriental, you feel that this is part of your identity. You are a fan. So think like that. Take time and take effort and take, of course, a lot of focus. So that's what China still needs to learn across the board from a variety of industries. And another thing, of course, that is very pressing right now is the sustainability practices, the green agenda. Of course, there is a big focus of, carbon neutral. There is a lot of focus from the top leadership going down to tech companies, going down to provincial governments and city governments, that's going down to smaller brands, that's going down to consumer. But that value chain is not yet, optimized, because a lot of waste is still happening and lack of awareness is still happening on the consumer level. Smaller companies don't really care that much, but already Western businesses and local big companies and tech companies, they are very much on point. So we can learn from the West how on all these different levels we can act already today to support the environment, to support this agenda, to become more green, to become better. And China is a great market to do that, because people have seen how in the past 30 years, the whole country has completely transformed. When I came to China to study, when I was a teenager, I came to the city called Chongqing in central China. Chongqing was known for 3 things: beautiful women, night view. It had this beautiful, night hilly view. And number 3 was acid rains. Chongqing was known for acid rains. When I looked out of the window in my apartment, I could see aircon looking like somebody gunshot it a few minutes before, because there were these droplets that over time would form holes and corrode the whole aircon. So that was my experience. But today, Chongqing is one of the, well, I can't say greenest and cleanest cities in China, but one of the huge transformation cases when they moved out hazardous manufacturing and done a lot of cool things. So Chinese consumers and people and companies, etc., they are ready. They've seen the transformation over the past 15, 20 years.
Believe it.
They believe it. They just need also a bit more kind of example and clarity and processes how to implement it even better in the market. So these are the 2 things that kind of pop up at me immediately. But of course, there's many other things that China can get inspired and learn from the collective West.
No, I think this is great, and I do believe companies that have this green mindset in the West, if they go to China, they will get a lot of interest from the local consumers and population, and even the cities and the governors, and to work with them. And I do believe that the transformation of China is an opportunity to work on that, and it's a lot about this soft power, I would say, or the things that aren't as tangible, but things that really you could say the meaning of brands and the purpose and the missions that brands have in the West is something that we could take more and more into China, and Chinese could learn from that. And so let's end on this positive note that we have to work together and collaborate and learn from each other.
We are better together, as we said. I think we had
yes.
an interview a couple of months ago,
more than a year ago.
More than a year ago, and you issued your fantastic book back then. And I think we finished that chat on saying, you know what, we are better together. And today, I think it's the same slogan that must be repeated again. We are better together. Instead of growing apart, let's grow together and reach heights.
And I also believe, and your book explains this as well, that we're getting closer to each other, meaning that our expectations, whether it's about sustainability or the human touch or whatever it is, the digital transformation, we're coming closer and closer to the same expectations. So this is the right moment to start working together. So it was fantastic to have you, Ashley, on this talk. And where can we buy the book? Maybe you can say something about that.
Absolutely. It's available. It's available on Amazon. You can get it right there. If you guys want to get a free copy or preview, hit me up on LinkedIn. My DMs are open. I might as well just or offer a free copy or pre-read if you are really interested. So hit me up there.
Yeah, that's great. And I can advise anyone, I mean, go to LinkedIn and get connected with Ashley. I mean, what you write on LinkedIn every single day almost, but definitely every week, you're giving this weekly updates on what's happening in China. It's unique. It keeps me updated because I'm not always in China these days. I live in Europe. And so if you want to know what's happening on digital marketing, on retail, on everything related to the big platforms, I mean, there's only one place to go, and that is Ashley online. So thanks, Ashley, and hope to see and talk to you very soon then.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. Cheers, guys.
Yep.